Hi everyone, welcome to the final session, session 4. This is where the fun starts for me because this is where we really start pulling this painting together and start making the magic happen. This is when, if the magic is going to happen in a painting, this is usually when I see that transformation happen for a painting to go from ho hum to la. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, back to my 6th round. As you develop your painting, you're gonna usually, in general, not always, work with smaller and smaller brushes. I do my mapping in sometimes with the darkest darks and the smallest details while I can still see the reference. But then in general, you work from larger areas with larger brushes to smaller areas with smaller brushes and smaller details. That's in general the direction you go as you develop a painting. And you hardly ever do a painting all in one layer, with my style anyway. All right, getting some cobalt blue with my 6th round. Getting the tip even more activated by picking up that paint and then dipping it in the water to just get a few little marks of pure blue. And I'm painting some of the shadows that I see, not painting strands of hair. I'm painting the shadows in between strands of hair and just making almost like a graphic type mark here. I was kind of just playing with it. And these are almost like puddles, milk consistency puddles of blue. You don't want to overdo this. And I was just playing. If you end up not liking them, they look too harsh, you can always scrub across them or along their edges to soften them later when they dry. So I'm just adding a little bit of more red leaning, more orange leaning, maybe more pink leaning mix here and there in this blue that I just put down just to add interest so it's not flat blue. And being careful with a few of these strands because I want them to kind of wisp in an arc that helps lead the viewer's eye down the mane and arc back towards moving up in a circle back up through the horse's muzzle. So I like how these mane hairs or clumps in this little area kind of arc around to lead the viewer's eye back around the mane and around back into the horse. So I was making some more literal, a couple more literal strands here. Just, you don't want to overdo it though, because it'll start looking really stiff. But a couple little arcs of mane to help the viewer's eye move down the mane and around back into the horse. It's almost like they act like arrows. So taking my time and painting these arcs of mane a little bit more slowly and painting exactly what I see, just a little bit though. It will stop looking dreamy real fast if you paint too many individual clumps this literally. And if you paint these clumps and then all of a sudden realize, oops, I overdid it, this is starting to look stiff, just bust out that scrubber and scrub through a few of them, across a few of them even. You can go across the strand or along an edge of the strand and just kind of almost like a jackhammer on concrete, busting up the stiffness. You can do that with a scrubber. And sometimes you just want to let this dry and think overnight too. Just building up the shadows. All these are dry. So now I'm adding another glaze, just tea consistency gray, to some of these areas to punch up the shadows. And that will give this horse's thick mane some depth and dimension by making some of the lower shadows that are darker, give them a little punch, and that'll make the mane look thicker. I'm also going to put in a little hint of the eye because that's all we see in the reference photo. So I'm using my drawing skills of making a line from the eye of the horse with my brush and seeing where that line hits the horse lower in his muzzle to try to get it lined up. And I think I ended up painting this eye and not liking it. I let it dry and then redid it, if I remember correctly. So I'm looking to see about where the eye should hit. Getting just a tip of a lamp black, about milk consistency. And this first try, I didn't really like the position of it. So I think I'm going to change it later, like I said. But there's only a hint of eye that you see in the reference. See, that's too high. So our poor horse looks a little wall-eyed there. So I was just kind of playing with it. But I'm going to change it later. It's just barely hinting, barely peeking out from behind the mane in the reference. And see, I got it too high. And I don't think I even put it in my line drawing, so that made it hard. So yes, I just found out, I'm sure some of you who follow me on Facebook know, especially, I just got a painting accepted into Women in Watercolor International competition, which is really hard to get into. Some people that I really admire didn't get in. And sometimes it's just luck, what the judges like. So even an artist like me who's gotten into really prestigious competitions, I still mess up with my drawing skills. It's okay. We are human artists. We are not robots that get everything perfect every time. All right, getting some cobalt blue, getting some junk off my palette mixed in. This is the one thing in this painting that's bugging me still that I'll probably go and fix as of this recording, is that shadow that I put behind his cheek here that I'm working on here that goes around his back cheek. I just thought it started looking too literal, and I just want to take a scrubber and scrub right through that. So I probably still will do that because it's just bugging me so much. But I'm just working on dry paper and augmenting some of the shadows that I want to play up with just very tea consistency glaze. And this is how a lot of realistic artists work too, is in many, many, many layers of tea consistency glazes built up over like 20 glazes that dry completely in between. Very typical way for advanced watercolor artists to work, especially realistic style artists. All right, some pretty thick lamp black and dropping it into this area that I got wet to make that eyeliner even a little bit more bold. Then blotting my brush to have control, because I just want tea consistency in my brush now, because I'm putting in a couple of the folds of the eye there above the eyelid on dry paper with tea consistency gray paint. Also, here I am just swishing over with very watery gray over the white of the eye. And when I scrub the eyelash, it's going to get some gray on the white eyelash. But here I'm painting a little bit of tea consistency gray here and there on the eyelashes, not everywhere. But you don't want the eyelashes to be flat white, because that makes them flat. You want some parts of the eyelash gray. And the eyelash is just a shape. It's not a bunch of individual eyelashes. That's not how you paint it. And while I'm in the area, I'm just adding a little bit more black to the pupil to make it dark and make it really pop. All right. This is starting a new session, I do believe, and everything's being painted on dry paper here and just adding a little bit more texture to the mane. So you can do that. You can paint some mane texture, let it dry. Then you paint some more texture on top of that to build up the textures and the layers and the depth with subsequent layers. Mainly focusing on getting the shadows directly under the clumps darker. Mixing in some, I think I put pink in there. It doesn't really matter. Might be pyrrole orange into my gray, just to warm up my gray a little bit, because I'm seeing warm shadows in this area, meaning they kind of look like a brown color more than a cool blue-gray color. And then just getting some of these shadows darker. I'm really going to have to change the position of my camera. This is killing me. I'm sure it's very annoying. I'm sorry. Then my hand is getting in the way with this new, I've got a new fancy camera that is nice, but it's harder to get it positioned than when I was recording with my smartphone. All right, just looking for the most important stories in the mane and telling those stories of hair or clumps that go diagonally down. And just darkening a few of the strands. Again, you can really overpaint this mane because we're trying to stay loose and dreamy. So remember just to tell enough of the story to tell the viewer that this is a mane. There, I'm getting some pyrrole orange with my cobalt blue for a gray, a warm gray. Just putting a little bit. Getting those little strands, especially that curve back around into the horse here, a little darker. And then I got some water added to my brush, and then I'm just adding a little bit of the horse's neck here that I see in the reference. So I'm just slowly building up some of these shadings and contours that I see in the reference in the architecture of the horse's face. Here is, if you look, you'll see this area has a little dark shadow because it's on the underside of the horse's face. So I'm just adding that with a little swishy stroke on dry paper with about milk consistency gray orange from my pyrrole and cobalt mix. Okay, getting some lamp black. I'm going to give another go to this corner of the horse's mouth that's bugging me, and I don't know why. I have my line drawing there, and it's kind of messing with my mind because it just doesn't feel right. But painting on dry paper and getting some of the details here a little darker with milk consistency lamp black. I would say this is more like thick tea consistency on dry paper. Getting some cobalt blue, some opera, just junk on my palette, keeping it gray, adding a little bit more hot pink opera, then blotting my brush out because I just want really tea consistency. Just a little bit of paint in my brush. And working on these contours of the horse's face through here on dry paper. So again, building up with many thin layers of glazy type texture, almost dry brush here that I'm scumbling on to paint the shadows. I blot my brush a lot so that I get more of a dry brush effect. This whole area is underneath the horse's face, so it should be a little darker. So I just put a glaze of gray brown. Getting more watery gray brown. Just build up a few more textures in the mane. Blotting my brush so that I have good control. Control. I moved that eye ever so slightly down, and I think it really helped. It really didn't need too much. Getting some more pyrrole orange mixed into my purple gray mix to make it warmer, but still quite gray. Getting some cobalt blue. I'm just going to add a bit more tip to this ear. Not much. Just futzing about, really. All right, this is my stiff scrubber. It's a size 2. And I often do scrubbing at the end of the painting when I probably won't need to do too much more painting in those scrubbed areas, because it does damage the paper some, especially on other papers. So I'm making sure my paper is dry, of course, and then getting my scrubber wet with clean, clear water. I've got my tissue ready to blot as I scrub, and I'm just going to soften a few places here and there in the mane. Just mainly scrubbing a few lighter areas in between the darker shadows and softening here and there. Lightening this side of the neck where it got lost a little bit, bringing the neck back where it got lost against the grasses there. Again, your painting will need something a little bit different than mine. Softening the shoulder. The shoulder is not an important area, so I really want that to be a soft edge. Incorporating some of these shadows and edges a little bit more, breaking them up a little bit. And then this is a great way to get some of the lighter areas that are surrounded by soft, darker contours, is just lift them out with a scrubber. Blending this little nose color into the lighter part of the horse's face, just like in the reference. Then this nostril is almost, you can't see it in the reference. So I'm softening mine quite a bit. There's a little lighter spot here in the reference where there's an indentation in the nose. Little lighter area in this spot. So just a great way to lighten areas. All right, next you're going to see me lift out a little paint to put some of the little indentations in the muzzle, just a few, but this really will show you how just a little bit more detail will really give you some nice realism. So if you look closely at this horse's muzzle, he has these light little folds in his nose that those of us who have been familiar with horse muzzles know they're velvety and they have these soft little wrinkles in them. And I'm really happy with how I was able to lift out these little indentations to tell the story of these little soft wrinkles in his muzzle. So that is the power of scrubbing. You can really do a lot of different things with it on a lot of different subjects. Anywhere where you need soft, light areas and within darker areas, like even in like foliage, you could use this. There's so many different ways to use this technique. Remember, when you're scrubbing, you need to scrub on dry paper. All right, I've got my little bamboo calligraphy brush again. They're just cheap brushes. Getting some Winsor Green Gold, some cobalt blue, some pyrrole orange, and I'm going to get it very watery. So it's kind of green leaning, isn't it? And I'm just making a few flicks with the very tip, and I'm holding my brush at the very end because I don't want to have control. I want this to look very loose and natural. And one way to get marks that look more natural and loose is to hold your brush at the very end, putting just a few spatters. You don't want too many, and then you can blot up if you get too many. But I'm just putting a few strokes of grass that point in towards the horse. So they're almost acting like arrows to tell the viewer's eye, hey, look, we're pointing at the horse. This is where to look. So I use that as a compositional element, a compositional design element to help the viewer's eye know to look at the horse. And now I mix some pyrrole orange and some cobalt for some more gray orange splats that kind of match the gray in the horse already. And in a minute, I'm going to make some huge splats to break up that lower right quadrant and connect the lower right quadrant into the painting. All right, getting some opera, some cobalt, and a lot of water. So you see how I mixed milk consistency and then I dipped my brush all the way up to the handle to get a lot of water because I want huge splats that kind of connect to each other. And then I'm dipping into the jar to get even more water on my brush to kind of connect these large splats. And I'm connecting the bottom right quadrant. Again, this is a take on my technique of vignette where I make the corners a little darker. And then I made these splats kind of go up towards the horse. And it'll take these splats a long time to dry. But you want to just let them dry like this because they'll dry looking really watercolory. They'll look like watery splats, which I like that. All right, I was getting impatient. This is about 10 minutes later and they are still really wet. But after about 10 minutes, they'll be set up enough so that if you blot at some of these splats, they'll be set up enough that you can put a piece of tissue paper down and blot up the rest of the water, and the splats, the color will have settled down into the paper enough that they won't lift up too much. All right, this is I think it's my size 4. It's the other scrubber that's a little bit bigger. It might be an 8 or maybe a 4. This is not my size 2. It's the next size up. There's 2 sizes available by Royal and Langnickel, so this is just my larger one. Just doing some final blending. Now that I've been able to come back to this with fresh eyes, as I edit this, I can see I want to break up that line that goes along the edge of his face down around his cheek. I want to break that line up. It's bugging me so much. But here I'm lifting out the light edge of his nostril. Look how perfectly this works. And it looks so natural and it looks so realistic, but it's so easy to do. And again, this is a technique that you can use in any painting to get a soft, lighter area that looks so natural and soft. I mean, I just think that looks great. So I just lifted out the edge of his nostril. All right, I've got my white gel pen. I want to put in a few more whiskers. I activate it by writing on my hand and putting in a few finishing touches. This is what I call the jewelry. I don't feel like this painting went through an ugly stage, but often when your painting is in an ugly stage, what you need to do is balance your values and put in the details like this white gel pen, and it'll really pull everything together beautifully. And your painting will surprise you sometimes how much better it looks after you put in those final darks, those final lights, like the highlights I'm putting in the eyelashes, just a few little eyelashes, not a lot. You don't want to overdo it, but a few strands of super light eyelash to add depth to the eyelashes because they are one of the stars of the show. They're one of the lightest areas in the painting. So they get more attention, especially since they're in the eye area. A few little squiggles in the mane, a few little hairs in the ear, not too many. You don't want to get it too busy. And I promise I'm going to work on not having my hand in the way so badly. My next tutorial. It drives me nuts. I'm sorry. I will work on that. Just putting a few little scribbles here and there. I've also done some tutorials like the black bunny I did where scribbling really helped me pull the painting together. I didn't do a lot of scribbling in this painting, but I have done scribbling in the past to bring a painting out of the ugly stage before quite effectively. And again, this is my Signo Broad. You want to get broad white gel pen. I get mine off Amazon. I do believe Dick Blick has them as well. This is a Pigma Micron pen, a size 02, that I often use to sign, but then I decided, hey, look, you know, what if I want to enter this in a watercolor competition? I think I'll use my 0 round. This is a Kolinsky Sable 0 round, but any brush with a small fine point will do. Dip just the tip in the water, and I'm going to sign with Opera. There's no hot pink down in this corner, and just a little touch of hot pink in my signature I think will balance that out nicely anyway. So I'm going to sign very subtly, but it is with hot pink with my 0 round on perfectly dry paper, blotting out my heel so that I have a lot of control and I don't get blobs of paint and water coming off the end of my brush tip. All right, remember when you take your tape off, if you are using hot press or a cheaper paper, if you're using student grade, you don't want to tear your paper. Heat it up with a hairdryer first, and then it should come right off, if you're careful. Arch cold press, I have never had arch cold press tear on me, ever. Hot press papers will, student grade papers will. All right, I may do an addendum to this painting because I might scrub that cheek there to break up that solid line that I have. It looks like it's a 1/2 inch wide going from from the eye down around his cheek. Totally bugging me, but that's how it is. Keep working on your painting until nothing bugs you. Don't worry about overworking it. Worry about underworking it when you're first starting out. All right, it's addendum time. This is basically finished, but like I was saying in my video, this line of dark that goes around his chin is totally bugging me. I feel like it needs to be broken up. So I'm gonna lighten that. And I'm gonna look at my reference for a little bit of guidance. All right, so I think right about in this area is where it needs to be lightened. So when you paint on Arches cold press paper, that's really good quality paper, it will stand up to scrubbing. And what I use for scrubbing is a stiff scrubber. These are specifically stiff scrubbers by Royal and Langnickel, made for scrubbing in watercolor. But for years I used brushes like these that are oil painting brushes that are stiff. And sometimes you can even cut them off to make them even more precise and even more stiff. So I could clip off this much and it would be even a more precise, harsher scrubber. So for years I used that. But today we'll use just my watercolor stiff scrubbers, and this is completely dry. You want your painting completely dry before you scrub. And then you want to have tissue at hand to blot. So we're going to scrub right in here. So I'm going to get my scrubber wet. We're going to break this line up. It's absolutely driving me nuts. And then you can blot. A lot of times what will happen when you scrub a lot of paint is it will build up. And you don't want these little buildups of paint, so I'll take a big soft mop type brush, get it really wet, and then just redistribute everything. And in fact, you can get everything wet that you want to scrub and then go in and really get some really delicate scrubbing done, and it really works really great. And you can really get some nice detail too. You can also move paint around. I'm going to move some of this paint around by just pushing it around. So there's a lot of different kind of effects that you can get. And soften some edges like that while I'm in here. All right, so that's bugging me a lot less now. And then I'll just soften it again with clean, clear water. And that looks a lot better in my mind anyway. All right, I think I'm finally done. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for joining me for this final session and for this wild pony tutorial. I had a blast painting this, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned so much that you can now take with you and apply to other paintings, to your own paintings, or to another tutorial you might want to do. And don't be shy about reaching out to me and asking me about other tutorials you think I might, or I think you might enjoy, if you would like any suggestions. And be sure to post on the Facebook group. I would love to see your paintings. And be sure to tag me. You can also tag me on Instagram. I'm rachelstudio.com on Instagram. I'd love to see you there too. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Now go watercolor your world. See you next time. Bye, everybody.